Good evening, everybody.
Kavod how are you?
Baruch Hashem, thank you. So we're going to continue the Bet Yosef. He says here, "Umash katav abal b'shnei yamim tovim shel Rosh Hashanah." That which the Torah said that when it comes to 2 days of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Tov that comes after Shabbat, or the other way around, Kadesh Yasu. So you also have to wait there the time that it takes to do the labor. Zeu pashut. So he says it's clear. Says Bet Yosef, Deha lo share Rashi miyad belel Yom Tov b'sheni, because Rashi doesn't allow to do it right away after the second day of Yom Tov. Mishum miman nafshach, because of an argument of right either way. Im cholhu, meaning that if it's weekday, hare himtin b'kadesh yasu, he already waited the time that it takes to do the labor. V'im kodesh, and if it's a Yom Tov, so then it was collected, it was detached on the weekday. So he says this reasoning does not apply to do 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. And also not the Yom Tov that comes after Shabbat or before. Whether it's before or after. That's what it's in Tosfot, this parak in Mem Amud Aleph. Shabbat v'Yom Tov af leferush Rashi. So it says when it comes to Shabbat and Yom Tov, even according to Rashi, asur mizel hazeh, it's forbidden from one to the other. V'kach chatav Aran, that's what it says in Aran. Peresh Masechet Betzah, the beginning of Masechet Betzah. Te'afilu perot shenashru b'zeh, that even fruits that fell off on this day, they're forbidden on the next day. Why is that? Because since they're forbidden on the day itself, so it doesn't prepare for the day after. And it goes on to say, so what does that mean, that the time that it takes to do the labor? We're talking about the time that it takes to detach or to trap the animal. It says that Bet Yosef, Tosfot, the Tosfot also writes this, Perak Chol Me'arvin, in this Perak, Lamed Amud Bet, the Lefi Divrei Rashi, so as according to Rashi, he says, Shepiresh the Tam B'Kadesh Yasu, Kadesh Lo Yanem Melechet Hayom Tov, that the reason why we have to wait till the time elapses is because you shouldn't benefit from the labor of Yom Tov. אין צריך להמתין כשיעור שלך ויצוד. So you don't have to wait the time that it takes to trap the animal of the Aviyat Talush, and or the time that it takes to detach from the ground the Avi and bring it. אלא שיעור תלישה שהוא ברגע אחד. So he says, really, you have to wait just the time that it takes to detach it, which is like a moment, קטן, דאז לא ייהנה ממלאכת היום טוב, because then you're not going to be benefiting from the labor of יום טוב. כתבו דרב"ג מפרש שצריך להמתין עד מוצאי יום טוב. כדי שיעשו, וטעם כדי שיעשו, יש לפרש משום שמא יאמר ישראל לגוי לעשות ביום טוב, כדי שיוכל לאלתר. So, saying here that they wrote that the Bahag explains like this, that you have to wait on the time that it takes to do a labor, as we said. So it says, "Umitam kadesh yasu yesh leparesh." So what's the reason for this? So he says, we explain that Shemei Yomar Yisrael the Goy, because maybe the Jew will say to the Goy, "La'asot b'Yom Tov, to do on Yom Tov, kadesh yochal le'altar." They should meet right away after Yom Tov. B'motzi Yom Tov. According to this reason, he says, "Hayat tzarich le'amtin b'motzi Yom Tov shnei keshiur sheni keshiur ve'tolosh ve'avid." We have to wait the time that it takes to detach, and also to bring it to shitlosh tabad. Because if you're just saying that's the time it takes to detach, so it says there is to say that maybe he'll say to the goy on Yom Tov to detach it. They should be able to eat after Yom Tov in a short time. Okay. So it says perhaps we can say that the rabbis were not that stringent, right? In other words, to make you wait also the time that it takes to come home, whatever, right? After you detach it. Maybe they weren't that strict. Okay. So that's the end of that. So it says, I already wrote this in the name of the Rosh. According to Rabbi Tam, Shehu Kedat Bahag, which is also like Bahag, like what we just read now. So it says, it seems to me that you have to wait the time that it takes to bring that type of food, which is close to the town. And it says it'll be explained in the tour close by. But he says the Ran in this parak, Gimel Amud Bet, he writes there that Shekatab, even though he wrote Shediber Rashi Ikar, even though he wrote that the main opinion is like Rashi. Katab the Kadesh Yasu Dainu. So it writes, but the time that it takes to do labor, what does that mean? The goy should go to the place where he picked it there, and finish the labor, and then come back here. And if he has a doubt, from where he brought them, should come from outside the boundary. That's the way it says in this Gemara in Masechet Machshirin, which is really a Mishnah. It says over there, Matzah ba Yerek, that he found, it says like this there, that if he found there some vegetables, Nimkar im Rov Goyim, which is sold if most of the goyim lokiach miyad. If the most people over there goyim, you can buy it right away. Klamar lemotzi Shabbat, that means after Shabbat. V'im rov Yisrael, and if the majority of people there are Jews, mamtin v'kadesh yavo m'makom le'ukarov v'mechza al mechza. Until the time it takes, they should come from place which is close by, half and half. Mamtin b'kadesh yavo, he has to wait till it comes. Time it takes to come. Makom karov, from a close place. So he says this vegetable, the prohibition is because it's attached to the ground. So he didn't mention, right, the time that it takes to detach it from the ground. Because it's very short, right? A couple of seconds. What does it take? So he says that you have to wait until they can come from a close by place. So you see from there that you also need the time that it takes to bring it. The Rashba also writes in Tshuva, B'Shem Rabbeinu Hananel, the name of this rabbi, the Kadesh Yasu, Hainu Kadesh Yelech Shechashecha Began Ve'agoz Ve'avi Umvar Midvarab. So he says it's a time that takes that from time that it gets dark in the garden, and they should detach it and bring it. So comes out from his words, that he wants to say, you have to wait until according to the distance of the place where you're bringing it from, or right, whether it's large or small. Okay. Rav Magid katab pek bet minchot Yom Tov. So says Rav Magid, Perush, he explains, Kadesh Yasu, what does it mean the time that it takes to do the labor? Yesh Misha Katab Kadesh Yalech Lefardes or Lagan Shemimenu Hayu Aperot. Some say it means that you have to go to the garden, right, and then bring it from there. Yavi Kan Beyesh, to bring it back. Beyesh Misha Katab, but there are others who say Shem Hu Rachok Sharei, that if it's far away, Kishu Shaita Chutz Tchum, it will be allowed. Just the time that it takes to get outside of the boundaries. So he says the first opinion seems better. Rabbeinu also says this, right, in the Torah, the laws of Shabbat. That's kind of show. That's the end of it. Okay. So who was that? I'm sorry, just 1 second. All right, so that wasn't the Torah, that was the Rambam. All right, Rav Magid says this is about the Rambam. Okay, good. So then he goes on here. Okay, we're almost done. So he says, "V'agad Maimon katu perek ba mirchot Shabbat." Says this rabbi in laws of Shabbat, b'shem Samak, name of the Samak, davar sheyesh b'mino b'mchubar, something which is attached to the ground, asul Yisrael acher, it's forbidden even to another Jew. B'kadesh yasu, the time that it takes to do labor, as we said. Hainu halakita. So that's only just the picking, not the bringing. But it says for the Jew that it came for him, you have to wait also the time that it takes to bring it. According to the one who requires the time that it takes to do labor, outside this boundary of the city. So he says, but there is a doubt. If it's enough, the time that it takes to bring it, from outside the boundary, by itself, or right, the place that it was brought from there, even though it's very far. So also there's a doubt whether it's enough at night, or im tzarich le'amtin b'kedei she'asu bayom, or you have to wait the time that it takes to do it in the daytime. Mistabar le'akel b'kulo. So it says we can be lenient in all these matters. Because it's only rabbinical, this whole thing, right? So we can be lenient. Okay, well, Ad Kan Hashem, that's the end of it. Katvot Tosot Perek Gimel de Betzah. Tosot in the third Perek of Betzah. יש לספק אם הביא קופה מלאה פירות. There is a doubt if he bought, right? If he brought a box which is full of fruits, there's a doubt. Okay, so what's the story? אם צריך להמתין כדי שילקטו באדם אחד. So we have to wait the time that it takes to be picked by one person, which is going to take a little bit longer, right? As opposed to many people, or בכמה בני אדם, or several people. ומה שכתב רבינו קודם בכדי שעשו אסורים, נכון? So it says, and before time that lapses that it takes to do the labor, it's forbidden to everybody, אף למי שלא הובא הוא בשבילו. Even to someone that it wasn't bought for him. נדבר בדברי הראש. So he says it's brought down in the Rosh. It's explained there. שכתבתי לפירוש Rashi that I wrote. According to Rashi, אסור לכל ישראל בכדי שיעשו. It's forbidden to all the Jews the time that it takes to do labor. שלא ייהנה ממלאכת יום טוב. He shouldn't benefit from the labor of Yom Tov. אבל בפירוש רבינו תם, according to רבינו תם, he says שפירש משום שמא יאמר. That explains. Perhaps he'll say, Legoy, Le'avi b'Yom Tov, she'ochal erev, they bring it on Yom Tov, they should eat it right away after Yom Tov goes out. Miyad. Mistaber she'mutar le'Yisrael acher miyad. So that would be, right, that would mean that it would be allowed to another Jew right after the holiday ends. Okay, that's the whole story there. Let's go to Shulchan Aruch and see what's there. So, like this, right? The Shulchan Aruch. Eno Yehudi she'avi doron le'Yisrael b'Yom Tov, right? If a goy brought a gift for the Jew on Yom Tov, im yesh mimino b'mechubar or she'mechusar tzeda, it's something which needs to be detached or lacking trapping, and asur, it's forbidden after the misha lo uva b'shvilo, even for the person that it wasn't brought for him. He cannot eat it that day. Right, so nobody can eat it that day, basically, right? That's what we're saying. Whether it's him or somebody else. So he says in the parentheses, so even if he put it in his mouth, he can't swallow it, right? So if he finds out, he's got to spit it out, right? More or less, right? Let's see it there. Okay. So then he says in Shulchan Aruch, it's also forbidden to carry them. Because they're muktzah, as we said yesterday. So it says, but in the evening, right, once the Yom Tov goes out, they're going to be permitted to eat it, whatever. But you have to wait the time that elapses to do the labor. So it says, what about if you have 2 days of Yom Tov, like in the diaspora? So if it was bought the first day, it's going to be allowed the night after, right? Even though it's second day of Yom Tov. As long as you wait the time that elapses to take to do the labor. So that's the Shulchan Aruch. Now comes Rama and says, "V'yesh machamirin leosro ad mutzi yom tov sheni." Right. So some are stringent, as we said yesterday. Right. They don't allow it until the second day of Yom Tov ends. Right. And we said that was the Rashi and the Rach. Right. So forth and so on. V'nohagim le'achamir im eno tzorach Yom Tov. So he says the custom is to be stringent unless it's a need for Yom Tov. Letzorach orchim right? Let's say for guests or some other purpose, right? So then he says we're lenient regarding others that item was not bought for them. Okay. So that was the Rama. Now comes back to Shulchan Aruch and says, it says also if it was brought on the second day of Yom Tov, you also have to wait till the night goes out, and then right the time that elapses to do the labor. But he says when it comes to 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, or Yom Tov that is right juxtaposed to Shabbat, ben milafanav, ben milacharav, right? Whether it's before or after, so you have to wait all 2 days, right? And then afterwards, and the time that it also takes to do the labor as well. That would be the way to do it there, because right, you cannot use this logic of permitting it after the first night here in this case. Why is that? Because it's not really 2 separate days. Right? Or it's a doubt. It's not really a doubt. It's one long day of holiness, and there's no doubt. That's the way the rabbis decreed it. And all the more so, right, when it comes to Shabbat and Yom Tov, they're both holy according to the Torah. So therefore, there's no doubts over there, right? So everything is a sure thing there. Okay, so let's go on. So now he explains, right, that element that we discussed, which is v'shiur kadesh yasu haynu kadesh yelech haynu yudi samuch leShabbat. So he says, how much is the time that it takes, to right to do the labor? How do we calculate that? So he says it means that the goy goes over there, right, to pick that fruit, whatever it is. And then he comes back here.
A round trip, Kabbalah?
Yep, that's what it is. Right. Except that what? It means that the guy went from his house, right, to pick it, and then he went to the Jew's house, right? So it's not exactly a round trip, you know what I mean? It's like a stopover more.
Round trip would be if he goes to the destination where the item was trapped or the market or whatever it is, right?
Round trip would be that he went from the Jew and then came back to the Jew. But here we're not talking about that. We're talking about he went from his house and then he went to the Jew's house,
Okay, thank you.
The stopover. Okay, so right.
So that's 2 different times, no?
Yeah, 2 different times. Yeah, you're right. Yes, 2 different times. It could be, it's probably 2 different times. So that's the way it is, right? So you got to calculate that, whatever, the best you can. Right? Okay, that's good. So it says, what about if he doesn't know where he bought them from, right? Let's say he doesn't know. And so then he says, Shiuran kedel shiavo. So then we're going to calculate it, the time that it takes to come from outside the boundary, right, of the town. So there you go. Okay, that's good. So we can go on from there. Let's So now he says another thing, right? Which is that afilu im safek im nilkatu ayom im lab asurim. So this is the tour, right? The tour says whether if there's a doubt whether they were picked on Yom Tov or not, they're still forbidden. So what do you see from there, right? That the rabbis decreed here even in cases of doubt. So which is something a little bit unusual, you know. So they were here very strict. So he says here in the Bet Yosef, Zeu ben neferush Rashi ben neferush Rabbeinu Tam. So it applies whether you explain it like Rashi or Rabbeinu Tam. Ta'ach yasikna be'edia b'Gemara. That's the way he says we conclude in the Gemara. In the Betzah, Chavdal Damud Bet. The halacha keman di'amar sapek mochan asur. So the halacha is like the one who says that whether it's doubtful, right, it's forbidden. The Siman Tav Tzadik Zayin. So in this chapter he says, Katavti, I wrote that Shesh Omrim Deha De'asrina and Sapek Mochan Tafka B'Yom Rishon. So that which we forbid, right, when it's a doubt, it's only the first day of Yom Tov. Aval Yom Sheni Lo Mishum Deha Bale Sapek Sekat. But not the second day. Why? Because on the second day it will be already a double doubt. Right? V'esh Chokim B'davar. Some argue with that. Ve'im Sapek Mochan Tzarich Le'amtin B'Kedei She'asu. Also, there's another question, which is that when there's a doubt, do you have to wait the time that elapses to do the labor? The Siman Shin Kafeh, right? It's over there written in the laws of Shabbat. Or the Siman is going to be explained here as well. It says the Tor the Gozal Shebiad Goy Im Choshishin Shimen Itzod Ayom Echtol Siman Tafku Yuzayin Besiyat Lishma. So he says, what about if the Goy has some kind of a bird, right? In his possession, do we assume that was caught today or the day before? When there's a doubt. Okay. He says, I'm going to write this later on. Okay. So then he goes on, now what Shatur said, it says if we can see, right, something is recognizable there, they were not picked today. Mutarin miyad, so they're allowed right away. Im hayu betoch hatchum, if they were in the town boundaries. Okay. So it says Yosef, this is the source for this, right? In the Gemara, Mem Amud Aleph. Hahi lifta de'ata b'mechoza. V'nafak rava chazye dekamisha shara rava lezvune mine. So there was a case where some goy, right, brought to the town of Rava some food, whatever, right, some fruits. So he allowed people to buy it. So why is that? Because apparently, right, it was already withered, in other words, it was already you could see that it was not fresh. It wasn't freshly picked. So that's why he allowed it. Amar Hai Vadai Metmol Nekra. So this was definitely picked the day before. My Amrat Michutz Litchum Atai Abba Mishvil. So he says, what are you saying? What are you going to tell me? Right? That it came out from outside the boundaries? So he says, if it came from this Jew, it's allowed for other Jews. Says all the more so this, that it was for the Goyim that he brought it. So then it says, why once he noticed that they were bringing it like on a regular basis to Goyim, then he forbade it afterwards. So the question is, what happened there, right? Why did he forbid it all of a sudden? So it says the Torah that if they were in the town boundaries, so it says since it's dealing with a case where it was brought for the Jew, אבל ישראל, I'm sorry, ישראל, אבל ישראל אחר, but if it was brought for a different Jew, אפילו הוא מחוץ לתחום, even if it was brought from the outside the boundaries, שרק, it's allowed. כמבואר בהי עובדה, like it's explained right in this story there, וכמו שכתב רבנו, and like the two wrote, the common close by, דהבה מחוץ לתחום בשביל ישראל, זה מותר לישראל אחר. That if it comes, if it was bought from one Jew, it's allowed for the other Jew. Mihai uvda mashma the perot the talash goy. So from this story, right, implies that the fruits that were picked by a goy, that's more from himself. B'yom tov and yom tov shem asurin leIsrael b'yoman. It's forbidden to the Jew on that day. Mishum muktzeh, because of muktzeh, right? Because of muktzeh. I see. Okay. Kakatav Ran perek en sadim. Ran also writes this in this perek in Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. ובגמרא הפרק אין צדין, so in the Gemara there, כ"ד עמוד ב' אמינן דחברי דאדימה ופרא דכבישי ביארקה שרו פירש רש"י חברי דאדימה הדרומים שלא נס לכאן והדרומית שתחת לחייהן ופרא דכבישי ביארקה כשלכתום תימנו מיד בירק שלא יברח לחלוכין הנה והנה ודאי מוכן לעניינות דנקרין שמערב יום טוב בהם דאשמינן דאף על גב דדמו לבני יומן לא חיישינן למראית עין. So he says, right, that if you know from the circumstances, right, it wasn't picked today, so then it's allowed, even though it looks like it's fresh. So there may be, some issue of, right, perception of prohibition, right? So comes to tell you that there is no perception. So he's saying. Okay, interesting. Good. That's that, I think. Oh, Gimel, I'm sorry. That's Gimel. Okay, so let's see the Shulchan Aruch here. Okay. It was out of order here. So it says in Gimel, אפילו אם הוא ספק אם נלקטו או ניצודו היום, even if there's a doubt whether they were picked right today or the day before, assume they're still forbidden, as we said. אבל אם נקרא בהם שלא נלקטו ושלא ניצודו היום, but if there's some kind of a sign there, they were not picked today or trapped today, מותר למי שלא הובא בשבילו. So then it's allowed for the person that it was not brought for him. ואם לא באו מחוץ לתחום, if they didn't come out from outside the boundary, mutar af lemי שהובא בשבילו. So then it's allowed even for the person that was bought for him. So it says here the Raman Haga, אינו יהודי מסיח לפי תומו שלא נלקט היום או נצוד היום נאמן. So he says, what about if a goy, right, is talking casually, right? We talked about this right in the morning, right? This issue. Goy is like speaking casually. So he's saying that it wasn't picked today or it wasn't trapped today. So he says, Naaman, he's believed, right? So there you go, right? So we believe the goy here who's speaking casually, right? Just like the other issues that we discussed. Okay, so that's that. But if he's testifying, right, as we said, the goy, we don't believe him, right? We don't believe testimony of a goy. Only casual conversation. That's what we said. Okay. Same thing over here. Okay, very good. So yeah, let's see if we can do maybe one more bet. So then he goes on with Yosef. He brings the tour here. What does the tour say? Even the person that was bought for him, if he uprooted it for his own purpose, for his own needs, you're allowed to eat it right away at night. Also something which was trapped by itself. Right? Or fruit that fell off the tree by itself. They're forbidden on that day, but at night they're allowed right away. So it says Bet Yosef regarding this. It's also brought down the Rosh. The Rosh says that reason the Rabbeinu Tam lo shayach ela begoy sheosim b'shvil Israel. So the reasoning Rabbeinu Tam is only relevant where you have a goy that's doing for the Jew. But if he did it for himself, mutar le'erev miyad. So it's going to be allowed right away after in the evening. Or bedavar haba me'elav, or something which is comes by itself. Lo shayacha ach gezerah. It's not relevant to be right to make this decree over here. Mashma badai de lo ata arosh ela le'atiram le'erev miyad. So implies that the Rosh is coming here to permit them in the evening right away. But that day itself is going to be forbidden for sure, he says. Mishum dem muktzah, because it's muktzah. V'chen hu b'data gaot maimon. It's also about gaot maimon like this. B'perek ba minchot Shabbat in the sixth perek of Shabbat. כך כתב הראש בעצמו בתשובה. The Rosh also writes this in תשובה. והביאה רבנו בסימן תק"ז. So Rabbeinu, right, the Torah brings this in this chapter, like 517. והביא ראיה מליפתא דמחוזה. So he brings the source from the Gemara to allow this. And even though the Rosh wrote that even on Shabbat day it's allowed to benefit from what the goy is doing, from self, right? Oh, so then why is it forbidden here, right? Usually we allow that because it's not mila mayam mashkiach harav Israel. So it's just for instance, if the goy drew water, the Jew is allowed to use it afterwards. Shani, so he says but those he says they're allowed. You know why? Because there's no issue of muktzah. But here there's an issue of muktzah here. And this is the reason why it's not allowed. And even though it teaches that if the goy lit a candle, you're allowed to use the light. Israel, the Jew. But there, right, the Jew is not touching the candle, right? Not so when it comes to fruits that fell off the tree, or tilashan goy, or the goy detached it, picked it, right? That's for his needs. Or something which is trapped by itself. Or shetzado goy, or the goy trapped it, for his own needs. There, there's muksa issue there. So he says the Rosh is only bringing a source from there to say the chol she'oseh hagoy. That's small, but if the right does the goy there, the goy does it for himself. Lo mitzar mipnei maaseh hagoy. The goy does it for his for himself. Then it's not forbidden. Mipnei maaseh hagoy because of what the goy did. Therefore, he says. So therefore, if it's something which doesn't have the issue of muktzah, right, it's allowed, on that day. If there's an issue of muktzah there, so you have to wait then until the day's over, because then the prohibition of muktzah already has left. It's not forbidden because of what the goy did, right? It's going to be forbidden right away. Even the second night, the second day of Yom Tov. That's what it says in Mordechai. Also, this Rabbi, right, in this parak, they said like this, but something which is trapped or picked, right, by itself, or bishvil goy, or because the goy, in other words, it's for the sake of the goy, and so then you don't have to wait the time that it takes to do the labor. Mutar b'yom tov sheni, so it's going to be allowed right on the second day of Yom Tov lechule al makon to everybody. Im achar shetzadato nimlach ve'evio leIsrael. Even if after the trapping, he changed his mind and he bought it for the Jew. Because he didn't trap it for the Jew. So you don't have to wait the time that it takes to do the labor. Even though the Rosh didn't differentiate between the Goy Haoseh Bishvil Israel, that does for the Jew, Haoseh Bishvil Atzmo, or he does for himself, only according to Rabbi Tam. Tosfot Besof Pek B'chol Ma'arim, but the Tosfot over there in this Gemara, Lamed Amud Bet, they did differentiate. Ken. Gam Ledat Rashi, even according to Rashi, the Pek Shoel, from this Gemara, Kuf Nun Amud Aleph, in Rob Goim Be'ir B'Mosei Shabbat, Rochetz Bo Biyad. So if the majority over there are going in that town, you can bathe right away. Kafetav Rabbeinu Yochanan. That's what it says in Rabbi Yochanan. Kafetav Yagot Maimon Perk Bet. He goes, so this rabbi says something. B'Shem Samach, the name is Samach. B'Zel Hashono, this language. Davar Shenaseh B'Shvil Goy is something which was done for a Goy. Or Naseh Me'elav, or was done by itself. Im Yesh Sham Chashash Tzeda, if there's their concern of trapping, the mechubar, or the issue of picking, the ish lechush shnitzod or nidkat hayom, so then we're concerned that it was done today. It's labor. Az vaday bo bayom sheuva asu mishum muktzeh. So then, right, for sure, that day is going to be forbidden because of muktzeh. Aval huva bayom tov rishon. If it was born on the first day of Yom Tov, mutar bayom tov sheni. It's going to be around the second day. B'shnei yamim tovim shel galuyot. When you have 2 days of diaspora, 2 Yom Tov diaspora. Aval b'shnei yamim tovim shel Rosh Hashanah. But if you have the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, or Yom Tov shel Achar Shabbat, or Yom Tov which is after Shabbat, or Refanav, or before, Asur, it's forbidden, up the Yom Sheni, even the second day. Aval b'motzesh Yom Tov Sheni mutarim. But after the second day, it's allowed. Yeah, right away. Af below Kadesh Yasu, even though it doesn't, you don't wait the time that elapses to do the labor. Okay. Since it wasn't done for the Jew, but if it was right done for the Jew, according to Halachot Gedolot, you have to wait until the end of Yom Tov, Sheni, or second day of Yom Tov, and also the time that elapses to do the labor. But according to Rashi, you have to wait until at the end of Yom Tov, Rishon, B'Kdesh Yasu. Time that it takes to do the right, as we said, labor. That's the end of it. In the first parak, they wrote in the name of the Samad, but Tosfot, the perot, Shenashru, and also Tosfot, that the fruit that fell by itself, Me'anen, B'Yom Tov and Yom Tov, Rishon, the first day of Yom Tov, Shel Galuyot, Mutarot B'Yom Tov Shel, it's going to be allowed on the second day of Yom Tov. והתוספות כתבו בפרק ימצדים, שש תוספות, רבי יהודה היה אוסר במחובר בצדה. He forbade when it's attached to the ground, or right when it comes to trapping. אפילו לא הביאום בשביל ישראל, even though he didn't bring them from the Jew, רק בשבילו, even though he bought it from himself as well. Only for himself, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, let's continue. So it says, בתוספות כתוב פרק אין צדין, תוספות writes in this פרק, רבי יהודה היה עושה במחובר, Rabbi Yehuda forbade, right, when it's attached, or when it's trapping, אפילו לא ביום בשביל ישראל, even though they didn't bring them for the Jew, רק בשבילו, just for himself, או בשביל גוי, or for a goy, אחר, some other goy, ולא משמע כן בגבי מרחץ בשבת. So he said that's not the way it's implied in the Talmudic story there regarding the bathhouse, the shire that's allowed. הואיל ואיכא גויים בעיר, even though since there are goyim in the town, ben svara lechalek ben davar, so it's not logical to differentiate between davar achila and davar acher. Differentiate between something which is edible or just some other issue, right? It's all the same. Ad kan, that's the end of it. Mashma dilinyan leil yom tov sheni. So it says that implies that when it comes to the second day of Yom Tov, v'chen le'inyan kadesh yasu, and also regarding the issue of waiting for the time that it takes to elapse the labor. So, right, they say that Rabbi Yehuda holds, just like if they were picked on the first day of Yom Tov, Bishuli said, the Jew you have to wait until the time that it takes to elapse after Yom Tov goes out, second day of Yom Tov. Same thing also applies if they were picked for the goy on the first day of Yom Tov. You have to wait till the second day of Yom Tov, and then also also time it takes to the labor. The end chiluk then nilkatu bishvil goy nilkatu bishvil Yisrael. So it says there's no difference between whether it was picked for a goy or a Jew. So he says they argue with him. For sure they said there's a difference. Ben nilkatu bishvil goy, the nilkatu bishvil Yisrael. What they were picked for a Jew or goy. For sure there is a difference. According to that opinion, there's no question. Which is the main opinion, right? The majority opinion. Okay, like we find regarding the issue of the bathhouse, the Shanilan ben goyim. So we have a differentiation, but we differentiate between whether you're a majority of goyim or not. They're not a majority. Like we explained already in chapter 326, which is the laws of Shabbat. Kataba Agur. So says the Agur, Kol Divrei Rabbeinu. So he says all the words of Rabbeinu, right? Right. In other words, he wrote the words of the Torah, and then afterwards he says, Kirashi. So he says in Ashkenaz, right, in Germany, they're lenient like Rashi. When they came by themselves. So he says, but my father, right? My rabbi, my father. So he says, he was machmir, he was stringent on himself about this. So now he comments on that, right? He says, I don't know why he ascribed the leniency here on Rashi. So it's because it was already explained that that according to the ones who hold like Rabbeinu Tam, it's also allowed. Came by itself. So it's possible that because according to Rashi, there's nobody that argues that that's allowed. Because there was no labor done with them. Bishvil Yisrael for a Jew. According to Rabbeinu Tam, he says, the Kamarevata Sharu, even though some of the rabbis permitted this, Rabbeinu Yehuda Asa. So it's nevertheless, right? Rabbi Yehuda forbade. Mishum Hachi Tala Shel Yuta Berashi. Therefore, he ascribed the permission, right, the leniency to Rashi. So it says there, according to this, it seems like the reason why his father was stringent is because he was concerned about the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Like it says, it seems from the Mordechai, which seems to go like that. They wrote, Rabbeinu Yehuda Miparish, right? This rabbi, Rabbi Yehuda from Paris, Haya Omer, the Bechol Midi the Achila Asur. So he says, right, if it's some kind of a food, it's forbidden. Gam Kishenaseh Bishvil Goy, even though it's made for a Goy. Gezerah Shemei Yaseh Melecha Bitof Sheulahut. Because we were concerned that he may do the labor because he's in a hurry, whatever, he's very anxious. So he says, therefore we decree, since he wrote the opinion of Yehuda, in the end, it seems like that's the way he holds, right? That's usually what they write in the end is the opinion that they hold by. Poskim, right? That's the style of the poskim. Okay, good. So let's go to Shulchan Aruch and we're done. So it says like this, right? The Shulchan Aruch. Bet. Afilu tilashan ha'inu Yehudi or tzadan le'atzmo, even if the Jew, right? I'm sorry, even if the goy picked it, or he hunted the animal by himself, for himself, right? For himself, or nafal min ha'ilan me'atzmo, or it fell off the tree by itself, or nitzot me'atzmo, or let's say it was trapped by itself, asur le'ochlo bo b'yom. So still it's forbidden to eat it that day, right? Even though there was no prohibition done there by anybody. Even for the person that wasn't bought for him, right? So we said, right, what's the reason why it's forbidden? Because it's muktzah. That's the problem, It was picked from the ground. But once the day goes out, right, the Yom Tov goes out, it's going to be forbidden right away. And once the Yom Tov, after Yom Tov, even for the person that was bought for him. Okay, so looks like we're done here. Okay, I guess we'll stop there. Okay, thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. We'll see you, Bezat Hashem, next week on Sunday. And Chazak Baruch, Laila Tov, Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you so much. Shabbat
All the
Shalom.
best. You too. Bye.